Hello, Mountain Lions Nation. Welcome back to another episode of Lionsverse, a weekly podcast giving you an inside look of the athletic department and giving you an opportunity to get to know some of your coaches as well as some of your fellow student athletes. I'm your host, Holly Stevenson, and with me today I have our athletic director, Nate Gibson. Nate, thanks so much for sitting down with me today. I appreciate you taking the time out of your super busy schedule.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Holly. It's always good to hear the podcast and glad to be on it.
Absolutely. Thank you. So this whole school year has looked very different from the rest, obviously with everything going on in the world. How have you been preparing and how have you been telling staff and coaches to prepare for this semester?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges of this year is that there really hasn't been a playbook for how to adjust and how to just try to make it as normal as we can, but at the same point understand that on a daily, weekly basis, things are very different than what we're accustomed to in a normal year. So I think what we've just been trying to find as many positives as we can and trying to look for things that we can really evaluate to prepare ourselves for the future. I mean, for many of our sports, they're either their entire season or their championships or some part of their season was taken away. So I think in a lot of ways, this is a great year to continue, though, to develop. And that's one thing I've been proud that we've been able to keep things like practices pretty consistent. But even for our coaches, recruiting looks very different right now than it normally does. And so, lots of things in terms of that this season, but trying to find ways that we can just keep getting better every day and trying to keep the focus on that versus what's been taken away from us, trying to focus on the things that we can still control and how we can move forward the most positively. And I think right now what's exciting is getting into a spring season that I think has a lot of potential to feel more normal. And when we get to our spring sports, I think we're going to have a lot of opportunities. We've learned a lot this year about how to make those the most successful. So I'm excited about what spring will offer, even though it's not going to be 100% back to what it normally is. But I think we have a lot more opportunities with those spring sports to have a somewhat normal season, and so those programs have really been preparing and getting ready for that as well. But again, I think it's trying to find the positives, trying to get better every day with whatever we have, trying to support our student athletes, and what a wild time this last year has been.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and with such, I'll say slow, because I know it was slow for me with a lot of the sports being rescheduled for the spring semester. I know I'm looking forward to a little bit of the craziness that normally happens in athletics with trying to coordinate everything. So I know it's probably a different feeling for you and Sarah and everyone that's actually trying to coordinate staffing the events and stuff like that.
Yeah, and you're right. It's our staff and our coaches have done a great job of just staying flexible, staying resilient, staying open-minded, and because things have changed so often and regularly at times. But yeah, no, I am too. I'm looking forward to some more of the normal rhythms of our year to where we get to the weekends and we know we're playing games, we know we're competing. Yeah. And I think we're all looking forward to that, having that consistency back.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the theme of the year and for all of the coaches and players that I've done interviews with always seems to be adaptability or flexibility. So how have you yourself managed to be able to stay to adapt to the changes, to the changing circumstances and everything like that? Because you have to run an entire department, so I can't imagine it's something that's an easy task for you.
Yeah, I think that's certainly been a challenge, particularly from a campus-wide perspective. I mean, not just from an athletic department, but in my role serving kind of across campus on campus leadership and with the campus administration. I mean, think about the amount of changes that UCCS has had to go through as well, just to an immediate change to remote learning and supporting our faculty and supporting our IT and everything like that. So. I think in a lot of ways, one of the, it's a cliche, but just taking everything a day at a time has been really important for me. Right. And knowing that, a meeting to a meeting might change information and how we need to adapt and change based on what we know, and ultimately how to keep our campus, keep our students, keep our faculty and staff as as safe as possible. And I think we've shown as a campus that we've done a really good job of that thus far. And
Yeah.
and I think at the same point, the levels of communication that I've seen, even within our staff, has been really, really high. And I think that's going to help us as we get, later on in future years. That I think our team, in terms of our coaching staff and athletic department staff, has really come together in unique ways this year that's made us better, and we communicate better. And we have a different perspective, I think, in some ways too. I know I do, where every chance we get to compete, especially, is special right now, because we've had so much taken away from us. And so I think it kind of helps reframe just the purpose of athletics, the purpose of what we're doing on a daily basis. And so that, I think there's some really good things there. But yeah, definitely flexibility, adaptability, resiliency. Those have, I think, been themes that we've consistently talked about in terms of how do we get through this. And I think those are also great things. If I come out of this year feeling like I've improved in those things personally and professionally, I think that's a really big win for me and for our department. If we can all say those things at the end of the year.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. As far as games go, does anything this semester look like, do the protocols or the expectations or standards for like what students and spectators can expect in terms of being able to come to games eventually or anything like that?
Yeah, and that's something that's, I think, a really big question that's still kind of laying out there, or sitting out there, because I'll tell you personally, I'd love to have our fans back in the stands as soon as possible. And so I think that's something we continue to evaluate as our state and county guidelines develop. There's kind of two parts to it, and I think on one side we've really ramped up what we've been able to do in terms of broadcasting games and making sure that people can at least view our competitions when we have them, and that's been positive. But at the same point, it's been a bummer that we haven't been able to have, especially our students, our parents, those folks that normally support our teams in person. But as we get guidance, as things hopefully continue to improve, I'm more positive about the spring sports being able to have some people in the stands. But ultimately we're going to make a decision on what's best and what's safest, and align those with county guidelines. And part of it right now is what we've been doing has been working, and we've been able to protect our teams. And I think that's a really important part of what we're doing still in the middle of a pandemic. And I don't want to open up the door too wide, even though it's something that we really want to do. So, but again, I think if our county, if our state continues on the trajectory we are now with transmission rates and things like that, we may find ourselves back in that yellow area and have more opportunities to welcome our students and fans back into watching our teams play again.
Right. Yep, that would be very exciting if that happens relatively soon for the spring sports. Absolutely. In your opinion, do you see any of these protocols or anything or as we try to get back to like normalcy, do you see any of like these protocols lingering in for the future seasons, future semesters, to try to keep teams, spectators, general public healthy and safe?
I think that is a great question. I think as I kind of prepare myself, especially for the fall, I don't think that all of a sudden in the pandemic we're just going to flip a switch and it's going to be gone. I think there's going to be things that we need to prepare for. I think particularly things like travel, and when our teams can get back on the road, get back on airplanes, or go to other states, leave our geographical regions. Particularly things like championships and travel, and I think there's going to probably be some I wouldn't be surprised if we're still doing some testing and having some procedures before we put our teams on an airplane. I think that might just make sense for the short term to be able to prepare ourselves for that. I hope we get beyond this, but I think that's something that's realistic, and if that's what allows us to play, then we've got the ability to do that, and we're going to continue to do that until we're told otherwise. But I think also with that said, I think we've learned some things about just kind of health and wellness and well-being and things that we've maybe done differently. So that's good. And but yeah, I don't think it's realistic to think we're just going to be out of this come, next August
Yeah.
completely. But I hope that we're 98% out of it,
Yeah.
and we're not worrying on a week-to-week basis whether or not we're actually going to be able to play, or
Hmm.
if something's going to come about that's going to prevent, what we're planning to do. But maybe we have a layer or two that helps just protect our students and our staff's overall health and well-being. So.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's kind of my perspective, and but as we know more, and shoot, if we continue on with things that are happening, maybe the vaccine rollout is something that people are talking about a lot, and
Yep.
I think our athletes being at a higher risk will have opportunities to get that if they want, and I
Hmm.
hope potentially that happens maybe even this summer. So
Right. Right.
that adds another layer of something that makes us feel better about how we can compete more normally.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of what ifs kind of rolling around everyone's brains and stuff. So yeah. But that's a great perspective to have. With all like with the adapting to all of these new changes and protocols and things like that, have you seen your roles or responsibilities as an athletic director change? And if so, how have they changed?
I think going back to maybe an earlier point as well, I think the level of involvement that I have kind of across campus,
Okay.
has changed. I think the role of athletics, certainly the fact that our campus and our campus leadership has supported our programs continuing to practice and play when we can has been great. But I think working with our campus folks, and especially our campus health authorities, like that's been really, really important, because I think they see, well, if we're going to continue to play games and travel and practice, we've got to have a different level of communication
Yeah.
and levels of working together and transparency about what's going on. So I think that's certainly been a change. A lot of the my daily meetings have changed in terms of who we're working with, and I think that's been really good, because we have a much kind of broader representation of people across campus, as we all of us are trying to kind of figure out how to get
Right.
through this time, and so that's been good. I also see at a conference in NCAA national level, there's
Yeah.
a lot more communication there, and certainly from a conference perspective, I mean, to hear that across 5 states in the RMAC, we're represented all over our region, and so to hear the challenges or things that are happening in different states and counties, has obviously been eye-opening, and you have
Yeah.
and learned a lot about kind of a bigger picture, more than just what's happening in Colorado Springs or El Paso County, but really across our region and nation, as you hear about colleagues even on the coasts, that west and east coasts, and the struggles they've had, and some
Hmm.
of their campuses haven't even opened at all, and they haven't even been able to welcome athletes back, since they left last spring. So
Right.
I think that's, again, I think been a good learning experience for me, but it's also been something that's been required during this time, because we have to have all that information to be able to make best decisions for UCCS, but then see the bigger picture across our conference and really across the country too.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna switch gears just a little bit. You are you've been with UCCS for a while as an employee, but you're looking at currently your 5th year as the executive athletic director, the official title. What was your goal when you originally took over the position, and how has that kind of evolved over the years? Because you've seen tremendous success within the athletic department, not only athletically, but like academically as well. You've UCCS's student athletes really have a good emphasis on like the student portion of that. So,
Yeah, no, I love this question. I think this is something that I really get excited about, especially as I look towards this next year and coming out of the pandemic and things like that. Because when I took over as athletic director, I had been here for 10 years, working under Steve Kirkham, and a lot of the things that we were really proud that we were building
mm-hmm.
certainly were coming into fruition, but we certainly didn't feel like we were there yet. And so
Right.
a lot of those things, like you mentioned, whether it be academics or leadership development or community service, we feel, we've consistently been recognized for those efforts, and our student athletes absolutely get it done in the community and in the classroom. And I think one of the things though, like for us, is that that's become the expectation and the standard. That's part of our culture now, is that we do those things if you're a student athlete. But at the same point, I think one of my big goals in taking over as AD was raising the standard of excellence in terms of competition and winning championships. And I think we've seen that. We've seen a lot of our programs win, their first championships in school history. And so, that's been in recent years. But that's also been exciting because it's showing me that what we're doing is working, and it's not about just building teams year in and year out, but it's about building total programs and complete athletic departments. So I think that's where I still have my focus, is raising that standard and raising the level of competitiveness, and giving our teams the resources and support they need to be the most successful. And certainly we still have a ways to go there, but that's still, I think, a huge motivating factor for me is how can we support our teams? How can we get more behind them? And at the same point, how can we just raise the standard of competitiveness and expectation that, it's not okay just to compete, but we need to get out there, and we believe that we have a championship expectation year in and year out. So I think that's what we owe to our campus. We owe that to our alumni. We owe that to our community, that UCCS can and should be an absolute powerhouse in Division II athletics. And I think that's where, look at what some of our spring programs like track and field have done, right? Like right before the pandemic slowed everything down, win both indoor championships and going into outdoor season with high expectations. And but at the same point, we have two teams that are ranked in the top 10 in the country in track and field, which is awesome. And that's
amazing.
Been fun to see, and see the facility come together, and see resources and support come together. And so those coaches are really raising the standard, and they have a championship expectation now, and that won't ever change. And I see like what baseball and women's lacrosse, some of our new sports, also have done this, in terms of the way that they've increased and improved their competitiveness every year. So I'm excited to see them get going, and certainly I'm excited to watch. I was talking with our women's soccer coach and our men's soccer coach. Like, I want to see what JB is going to do with an incredibly talented team with high expectations that was ranked number 1 in the country last year for 8 consecutive weeks, right? And so I think those are some exciting things that it's kind of new territory for us. But again, we want to continue to raise that standard and have a championship expectation in every sport.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, and talking to a bunch of the different coaches, like, they definitely have come in with that mindset, but they also, a handful of them, Christy Elder, the volleyball coach last week, it was even saying that, like, you really make it easy for them to feel like that all they have to do is focus on their team and getting them better, because they're not worried about stretching resources or anything like that. So I think that's a huge testament to you. And with like our teams being ranked and everything like that, obviously there's a lot of good cohesion going on within the department. So it's real impressive to see, just as like a student and a sort of employee there too. So
yeah, no, I agree, and I think one of the messages this year is I feel like we've barely scratched the surface yet too. I think we still have plenty to accomplish. I don't know where our limits are at UCCS with all the things that we have, whether it be resources or support, our campus, our community. I mean, I look across the country, and very few schools have what we have in terms of, like, walk outside, look at our views, look at our community, look at the academic programs and the job opportunities that people have thereafter. I mean, we've got things that one of my things I've always said is we have everything that you can't buy. So the more that we have the things that you can buy, like scholarship support and facilities and things like that, but everything else, I don't think many schools in the country rival what we have in terms of our degree programs, our community, our what a special place to live and go to school. So anyways, I that's where I get really excited as I look to the future, that we have so many things to be excited about, and I think the future is bright, and the best is still very much yet to come.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. Well, I know you have a busy schedule, and I want to stay pretty close to our time, but I do have just one more question for you, because you have been at UCCS for such a long time and kind of worked your way up the ranks. Was being an athletic director always the goal for you? And have you ever seen yourself going to a different school or even a different division for like a potential career?
Yeah, good question. To be honest, I initially didn't really ever set out to be a collegiate athletic director. I went to school and I wanted to be, a high school teacher and a coach.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came back to UCCS, or I should say when I came back to Colorado Springs post college, I ran into Steve Kirkham downtown, and he was like, "Yeah, I got a job open in athletics if you'd be interested." We're trying to do some pretty big things there, and
Mm-hmm.
he was trying to build a staff and gave me an opportunity, which was just fantastic. And I think almost immediately fell in love with college sports and saw
Yeah.
UCCS as was one of the best places in Division II really to be, having been around a lot of Division II programs.
Right.
Just because really we were selling, at that point around the potential of what UCCS could be. I mean, at that time we were a 6,000 student campus with very few dorms, and most of the buildings that people see on campus didn't exist at that point. But
Yeah.
just to feel the momentum and the almost this, like I describe it like a rocket ship that was getting ready to launch. Like we were in this process of building something really special, and so I think that's what's been fun for me. And I think as I've grown, I haven't really ever looked for other opportunities outside of UCCS just because of how much I believe in what we're doing. And I think as long
Awesome.
as I continue to feel that way, I don't see a better job in Division II athletics than what we have at UCCS. And I also don't really feel I've never felt the pull to go to another division either. I've talked with colleagues and counterparts, but at the same point, I just really believe in what we do at Division II.
Yeah.
I think this is a wonderful place to be in terms of what we can do, in terms of supporting the entire student athlete, versus just maybe the total focus on winning and wins and losses. And also like to be able to support my coaches that way and know that,
Yeah.
there's times when we may have a down season or a lean recruiting year, or things that we have to make changes to, but we can see a bigger picture that is maybe bigger than just wins and losses, even though that's at the top of the list. So
Right. Right.
um, I really just like what we've built here, and I'm from here. I mean, Colorado Springs is my home.
Mm-hmm.
I have a family and all my friends, and this is where I love to be. So I see again. I don't know. There's no other job in Division II that I think is as good as what UCCS has,
Mm-hmm.
and then to have the freedoms and the trust of my campus and leadership to be able to build it the way we want to and the way we think is right, I think is what makes this just a dream situation for me.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, and like I said before, it's a great testament to everything. Like your passion really comes through, and it shows through all your colleagues and everything. So that's awesome to hear. Thank you again. I know I have to let you go. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day to chat with me. It was great talking with you and getting to know you a little bit more. Mountain Lions, join me next week for another episode of Lionsverse. Until then, enjoy the rest of your week.